My life came crashing down, and for a second, I really thought it was over. But it was in that darkness that I found a single skill so powerful it has made every challenge since feel. Now, effortless doesn't mean the problems just vanished or that life suddenly became easy. It was more like I was lost in a thick, cold fog. I had no map, no compass, and zero hope. Every step was a guess, but then I found something. It wasn't a map, but it was a way to see in the dark. To really get how I found this skill, we have to go back to the beginning of my darkest year. Just 2 years ago, my life looked pretty good on paper. I had a career I'd spent a decade building, a stable long-term relationship, and a cozy little apartment filled with books and plans for the future. Was I over the moon happy? No, but I was comfortable. And I made the classic mistake of thinking that comfort meant stability. I'd built my entire identity on 2 pillars, my job and my partner. I was a senior project manager. I was so-and-so's partner. These weren't just titles. They were the scaffolding holding my sense of self together. What I didn't get, though, was that this scaffolding was incredibly fragile. It was all external. It all depended on things I couldn't actually control. The first pillar crumbled in April. The company I worked for went through a massive restructuring. My role, which I thought was essential, was suddenly redundant. Just like that, I was walked out of the building with a cardboard box of my stuff, feeling this bizarre mix of humiliation and total disbelief. The identity of senior project manager, which I'd worn like a second skin, was just ripped off in a single afternoon. Still, I thought, I can handle this. I had my partner. We were a team. But losing my career sent shockwaves through every part of my life. I got quiet, anxious about money, and deeply insecure. The confident, driven person my partner fell in love with was gone. In his place was this ghost haunting our apartment. 2 months later, after a string of painful conversations that felt more like autopsies of our relationship, the second pillar fell. She left. And just like that, I wasn't a project manager. I wasn't a partner. I was nothing. The scaffolding was gone, and my whole world had collapsed into a pile of rubble around my feet. The months after that are just a blur of gray. I felt like I was living underwater. Every simple task, getting out of bed, making toast, answering a text, took a ridiculous amount of energy. My apartment, once my safe space, felt like a cage. The silence was deafening, broken only by the same loop of thoughts playing over and over in my head. You failed. You weren't good enough. This is all your fault. I completely isolated myself. Friends would call, and I'd just watch the phone ring, unable to find the energy to pretend I was okay. I couldn't stand their pity, and I had no words to explain the huge, crushing emptiness that had taken over. It felt like a sickness in my soul. Rock bottom wasn't some big dramatic movie moment. It was quiet. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes from the life I was supposed to be living. I hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 days. I remember just looking out the window, watching people walk by, living their normal lives, and feeling like I was a different species entirely. The thought that finally landed with this bone-crushing weight was, maybe this is it. Maybe this is all that's left. It wasn't a cry for help. It was just a fact, a surrender. The fog had completely swallowed me, and I'd finally stopped trying to find a way out. I accepted that this darkness was my new reality. I had truly given up, and right there in that moment of total surrender, the smallest crack of light appeared. It's a funny thing, isn't it? How the biggest changes in our lives don't start with a bang, but with a whisper. If any part of this story feels familiar, If you've ever been in a fog so thick you thought you'd never get out, I really hope you'll keep watching. And if this is hitting home, maybe think about subscribing, because what I'm about to share is the reason I'm even here telling this story today. In that moment of surrender, I didn't have some huge epiphany. Instead, I just did something different. I was so exhausted from fighting, I just observed. I looked at the pain not as this monster I had to beat, but just as a thing that was. And with that one tiny shift, a question I'd never thought to ask before just quietly popped into my head. What if this isn't the end of my story, but some kind of strange and painful beginning? That question sent me down a late-night internet rabbit hole. I eventually stumbled on the work of psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, who came up with a term that changed everything for me: post-traumatic growth. The idea is simple, but it's also profound. Many people who go through intense struggle and trauma don't just bounce back to who they were. That's called resilience. Instead, they bounce forward. They experience a fundamental, positive psychological change. The struggle itself becomes the catalyst for developing a deeper appreciation for life, stronger relationships, a new sense of personal strength, and a richer understanding of the world. I realized my darkest year wasn't a punishment. It was a classroom. The worst times are often the best teachers because they force you out of your comfort zone and make you build skills you never knew you needed. They shake your core beliefs, and in the process of rebuilding, they let you build something way stronger. The one skill I learned, the skill that makes every challenge feel different now, is the conscious practice of finding the growth in adversity. It's the ability to look at a painful, hard situation and ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What is this trying to teach me?" It's a way of processing what happened, where you actively work to make sense of it all and reshape your view of the world. It's not about pretending the pain isn't there. The pain is very, very real. It's about feeling that pain and then intentionally looking for the lesson wrapped inside it. For me, losing my job taught me my worth isn't tied to a title. Losing my relationship taught me I had to learn to be a whole person on my own before I could be a good partner to someone else. The loneliness taught me how much community matters and the courage it takes to actually ask for help. These weren't just silver linings. They were tough lessons I earned. This skill isn't about toxic positivity. It's about finding the benefit and understanding that even the absolute worst events can force you to reevaluate what's truly important in life. Learning this skill wasn't some overnight fix. It was, and it still is, a daily practice. It's a muscle. And here's how you can start building it. First, you have to give yourself a break. Practice acceptance and self-compassion. Stop fighting the reality of what's happening. The worst times in your life are not the times to beat yourself up for not being stronger. For a while, your goal might just be to get through the day. And that has to be enough. Be as kind to yourself as you would be to a friend going through the exact same thing. Second, change the question. When you find yourself stuck in that "why me" loop, consciously stop it. Ask, "What can I learn from this?" or "How can I grow from this?" At first, your mind will probably come up with nothing. That's okay. Just keep asking. Let the question hang in the air. Your brain is a problem-solving machine. If you give it a new problem, eventually, it'll start looking for answers. This reframes the challenge from a dead end into a doorway. Third, practice gratitude, but not for the hardship itself. Find gratitude for the little things that are still there despite the hardship. For me, it was the taste of a good cup of coffee, the feeling of the sun on my face, a friend who texted thinking of you and didn't need a reply. Practicing gratitude, even when it feels a little forced, can dial down stress and build up emotional resilience by reminding you that not everything is broken. Fourth, Find purpose by taking action. Start ridiculously small. For me, it was making my bed every morning. It was one tiny act of order in the middle of chaos. Then, it was a short walk. Then, applying for just one job. Action creates momentum, and it reminds you that you aren't powerless. This is what builds self-confidence, a critical piece of getting through tough times. Your purpose doesn't have to be some grand mission. It just has to be yours. Finally, build your support network before you need it. One of the biggest lessons from my collapse was that I had no one to lean on because I'd never practiced being vulnerable. Reaching out for support is a key part of this whole process. It's not a weakness, it's a vital survival skill. My life today isn't perfect. I still have bad days. I still have setbacks, but the fog is gone. The difference is that the foundation of my self-worth is no longer external. It's internal. It's built on the knowledge that I survived the complete and total collapse of my world. I now see every challenge not as a threat, but as another chance to practice the most important skill I've ever learned. The darkness didn't break me. It remade me. My life didn't just come crashing down. The ground was just being cleared to make way for something better, and that has made all the difference. That is the skill, so powerful that it has made every challenge since feel, in its own way, effortless. I'm sharing this not because I have all the answers, but because I know what it feels like to think your story is over. It's not. Your pain can become your greatest teacher if you let it. It has the power to help you discover a strength you never ever knew you had. So I want to ask you, what is the biggest challenge you've overcome, and what did it teach you? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could be the crack of light that someone else desperately needs to see in their own darkness. And if this message stayed with you even just a moment, subscribe to the Stoic Room. Thanks for listening.